I've been here at the hospital for, it'll be 15 years in February, this coming February. Prior to that, I was 9 years as a parish pastor. My first church was in Central Illinois, out of seminary. I was there for 5 years, and then I was at my second church down in Arkansas for almost 4 years. You know, in my second church, it's kind of where I went through the process of reevaluating my ministry and wondering what I was going to do, and it wasn't going well in that parish. And I had some guidance, and I took some clinical training and realized that God was calling me into ministry, but it wasn't ministry in the church. It was more hospital ministry. So I've been here almost 15 years, and it seems like I started last week. As I do my ministry here, I have priorities. Obviously, the emergency situations, the crisis intervention is the biggest one. You know, whether it's a trauma that comes in through the ED or you know, something that's happening in ICU. Those things come first, and unfortunately I don't have a lot of time just to do individual visits on everybody in the hospital, though I would really like to do that, but as one person I can't do all that. And my day is pretty much spent on you know, responding to needs of people down in, you know, throughout the hospital, whether that need comes from patient, family, nurse, physician. You know, I set my priorities as I go along. So I like to, in fact, we just started, a couple of years ago, we started a volunteer group called the Caregivers. It's volunteers that come in to visit people who have just been admitted to the hospital. You know, they're able to see a lot more people than I am. And so they get the information on whether or not they need their church contacted or they want to see me. And that helps me then when they give me names, then those are people that I can focus more on rather than just kind of going out in a shotgun pattern, you know, hoping to hit somebody that might need me. At least there's been a contact made with that individual, and I know that somebody's talked with them and they said they would like to see me, and then I go follow up. And then I have, like I said, I have the caregivers. I've got 6 or 7 of those. Those are volunteers. And then I have a crew of on-call chaplains, and there's, I believe we're up to 10 or 11 of those. And they cover for me when I'm not here.
That's great.
So evenings, weekends, holidays, when I'm on vacation, you know, the hospital's covered 24 hours. And this goes back a few years. I was called by a nurse to see one of her patients. And she told me that the patient was depressed. The patient was in bed in a fetal position with the covers pulled up over her head. So I go, okay. But this particular person, I went in and sure enough there she was. She was in bed, fetal position, covers pulled up over her head. And I go in and knock on the door and introduce myself. She didn't say get out. She didn't move. So I just took that as okay, my invitation to stay. Pulled up a chair, sat beside and just sat there with her. After a period of time, she pulled the covers out from over her head and said hello to her, and we started getting in some chit-chat back and forth. And she started telling me about 3 important people that were in her life. She had 2 good friends and her husband. And I can't remember the time frames anymore. It might have been 2-3 years before this particular hospitalization. One of the friends died. And she went through that and she told me that story and how she felt and everything. And then but she ended that with, you know, but she had her husband and that other friend to help her through it. So then about a year or so before the hospitalization I was meeting with her husband died. So she went through all of that. And again, the grief and what she went through and the emptiness and sadness. And but she ended that with, but you know, I had so-and-so there and she helped me through it. Well, guess what happened 2 weeks before this hospitalization? That friend died. And now she's in the hospital with abdominal pains. So I go in and she just tells me, but it was what I found fulfilling was that as she told her story, she became more animated. And by the end of it, and I probably was with her an hour and a half, 2 hours or more. And by the end, she was sitting on her beds with her legs crossed, and we were telling stories, and she was laughing. But you just saw that transformation. So I think that, just being with people and letting them, giving them somebody that'll listen and letting them open up. And I mean, I've heard it a number of times, people, as they're telling their stories, I've never told that to anyone before. If you want a foundation from, what I use to do what I do is I use the foundation of in Genesis chapter 2. In Genesis chapter 1, we hear about God creating everything and God saying it was, God said it was and it was good. But there was something, something God said in Genesis 2. God said that wasn't good. He said it's not good that the human should be alone. And so the woman was created and community was formed. So it's community, and it's within that community that we experience God's blessings and God's love and God's care for us. Because like with that individual I just shared with you, she needed someone to tell her story to. She needed somebody to listen. And so it's not good to be alone.